Hello and welcome. I'm so excited for this video because I knew it was only going to be a matter of time until we talked about Jennifer's Body. I love feminist horrors. I love Rosemary's Baby, Carrie, Stepford Wives, think Ginger Snaps, and so naturally Jennifer's Body was going to come up at some point. It wasn't until I was watching Madison Beer's music video Make You Mine when it really struck me that Jennifer's Body, having come out over a decade ago, has kind of grown to a cult classic status as a film. So that's what I want to unpack today. Specifically, how the proliferation of feminist and queer media has kind of shifted, maybe, the dominant gaze from the male gaze to the female gaze. And so I want to explore that not just through film theory, but through data. And so we're going to take a deep dive into the last 10 years of reviews of Jennifer's Body to really see how the way the viewership of the film has shifted over time. In the process of doing research for this video, shout out to my fiance, who is an expert data scientist, researcher, who helped me really aggregate and understand this data. But in the process of collecting it and analyzing it, there were some really interesting insights that I will be getting to. If you can't wait, I'm going to leave the timestamp below so you can just skip right to it. If you're a Jennifer's Body fan and you don't want to dive into the historical context of the film, then I would urge you to skip forward just to see what came up in analyzing the reviews. Okay, so let's dive right into this. So this graph captures the average ratings by year from 2010, just on the heels of the film's release, to 2024 present day. And you'll notice there's a general trending upward, and it starts relatively low, actually pretty low. It's an average rating of 2.5 at the time of the film's release. And this is no surprise. In many interviews, Diablo Cody and Megan Fox have both expressed that the film was mismarketed to a male audience, even though it was really written for young girls.
Can you talk about, because obviously I wasn't in on the audience testing and the screens and the testing for the publicity and the marketing and all of that. What was that like? Because obviously something went in a very wrong direction. And where was that coming from?
Well, the test screenings were horrible. And I believe that's because of the audiences that were recruited for the screenings.
Which were frat boys?
Exactly. The studio had a very strong, unshakable belief that this movie needed to be marketed to young men, specifically. So that was who they...
Which came because of me, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. I got a very memorable email from a marketing person at the studio once, where I had sent him this articulate defense of the film, and here's how it should be marketed. And I said, what specifically are you thinking? And he wrote back, Megan Fox hot, 3 words.
For putting a trailer together?
That
or
was
just for marketing
in terms of
general?
In terms of what is the value of this film.
Okay.
So that should give you an idea of where they were going with it.
Somebody was mentioning that at a test screening or you had a test group and somebody was like, it needs more boobs.
I still have the card. So there was a test screening that a kid wrote. They said, what would you improve about this film? And the kid wrote, needs more boobs, and spelled boobs B-E-W-B-S. And that was the data that was collected and taken seriously by the people who were marketing the movie.
And you can actually see in the film's marketing materials, its poster and the trailer, the marketing materials kind of pinpoint aspects of the film that out of context can be quite objectifying. I love this quote from this Bust article that says that the film's title itself was intended as ironic commentary on female objectification, but this became lost in the many ads and posters highlighting Megan Fox's body and sexuality as the film's major sell. The shocking sleepover kiss scene between Jennifer and her best friend Needy featured heavily in the film's marketing campaign as a way to attract bros to the box office. So yeah, there was queer baiting going on. And ultimately, using Megan Fox's sex appeal as a marketing tactic actually overshadowed a lot of the feminist themes in the film, themes of female friendship, rape, revenge, sexual assault, and queer relationships. So that's where the film started upon its release. And then if we look at the average ratings by year, by 2019, suddenly there's this gigantic upsurge where the film is nearly averaging 5 stars on Rotten Tomatoes. Although the volume of reviews is not nearly as high as when it was initially released, the people who are now coming to review the film have a much more positive sentiment toward it. Suddenly, people are viewing it through a new lens, through new eyes, able to pick up on the film's dark feminist themes and appreciate them. I love this quote from Magdalene. "Queer Cult has saved this film from being buried in men's crass assumptions about women, making it a cult classic, even if it's flawed and definitely not a masterpiece." What's interesting to note is the ways in which the film's cultural status is shaped by a broader cultural shift toward feminist and queer perspectives that's happening in media and been happening at least in the last 5 to 10 years. Some can attribute it to the Me Too movement in 2017, 2018. Most importantly, what's happening, it seems at least, is the popularization of the female gaze in the digital space. And that seems to be why and how people are rediscovering the film with a new appreciation, because they're looking at it through a female gaze as opposed to a male gaze now. It's kind of met its audience, and not only has it met its audience, but the audience is now equipped to receive its themes and understand it as a feminist film. Now, the most revealing analysis that we did was looking at words most commonly used in reviews of Jennifer's Body in 2010 compared to words most likely to be used in reviews post 2019. And so we did a log odds analysis of this. It was my first time doing it, and the results were extremely interesting. But before we go through them, I think it's so critical for us to do a bit of a debrief on male gaze versus female gaze, just a refresher. I created this little chart here. First, let's talk through the male gaze and what that looks like across the camera, the audience, and the character, because those are kind of the three things that create the male gaze together, working together. And Joey Soloway actually came to TIFF in 2016 and gave a talk on the female gaze, or what they kind of wanted to coin as the female gaze, and proposed 3 ways in which camera, audience, and character also work together to constitute the female gaze. So let's analyze both of those parts against each other. The camera in the male gaze prioritizes capturing action over emotion. It's more about looking at character and perceiving and capturing action. Whereas the female gaze, or the feminine gaze, is more about prioritizing feeling and emotion and empathy over action. In Joey Soloway's TIFF talk, they give a beautiful little spiel about actually reclaiming our bodies as a tool to guide our filmmaking process, and that we should prioritize our bodies over equipment.
It uses the frame to share and evoke a feeling of being in feeling rather than looking at the characters. So I take the camera and I use it to say to my audience, I'm not just showing you this thing, I really want you to feel it with me. And I have my particular methods. Our cinematographer, Jim Frona, when he's holding the camera, his body is in feeling. He's not capturing, but he's actually playing an action like the actors. I'm whispering in his ear while he's shooting between takes. He's playing the action of melting or oozing or allowing. He's feeling something in his body that we have chosen together while he's holding the camera. And so you may notice when you see this kind of filmmaking that you feel more, or as the millennials would say, you get the feels.
Okay, my camera died. So the male gaze camera is used strategically in Jennifer's Body to objectify Jennifer in moments where she is about to devour her prey. So it's almost like this allure that you, as the viewer, are like questioning and aware of as you're experiencing it, which is a very feminine gaze thing to do. But the female or feminine gaze is also used throughout the film to really emphasize a lot of the emotions going on between Jennifer and Needy by kind of having the camera linger on them in kind of this intimate way. The male gaze audience is considered a masculinized audience. So the audience is kind of deemed automatically male. So when observing the male gaze, the audience kind of plays the role of a spectator who is watching a final product. Whereas in the female gaze, you experience what is called the gazed gaze. And this is something that I'm still unpacking, but it's essentially witnessing how it feels to be the object of the gaze. Usually before Jennifer preys on someone or attacks someone in the film, the audience is kind of seduced by her through the male gaze. The feminine gaze is used through the voiceovers of her best friend Needy, in which Needy expresses how she feels, and not just how she feels, but how she feels about being seen by the people around her in her environment with Jennifer. And she makes this commentary about how she feels in the context of their high school social world and dynamics. And so within the male gaze, characters themselves interact within the illusion. They interact with each other within an illusion. Whereas within the female gaze, the characters tell the audience how they feel about being seen. So the characters are now returning the gaze. And this is kind of done in Jennifer's Body by Jennifer kind of manipulating her sexuality and using it as a weapon against the men in the film. So she's kind of self-aware of the way in which she's going to be perceived and objectified, and she's using it actually now as a tool to lure the audience and to scare the audience as well as these men. And so now it's kind of like returning the gaze back. Now we have the awareness that Jennifer knows that we are gazing on her, and that's like a hallmark of the female or feminine gaze. So again, with the male gaze, the goal is kind of this masculinization of the audience in the process of objectifying and sexualizing women. This is either done for the men in the film or the men in the audience. Whereas the goal of the female or the feminine gaze is for both women and men to move freely between the positions of subject and object. It's a conscious effort to create empathy. So it's prioritizing feeling over objectification and action, and emphasizing the humanity in subjects regardless of their gender identity. What I find so valuable about Jennifer's Body, despite the fact that, you know, it's not the most well-written film and it can come off a little bit cheesy at times, but Diablo Cody expertly uses Needy's perspective to make us question the gaze, because Needy provides a critical commentary that questions the superficial nature of the gaze. And this kind of technique of using Needy's voiceover in contrast with what you're seeing from Jennifer actually makes the film's critique of the male gaze an important part of its structure. So it's not that the film is devoid of having a male gaze, it's that the male gaze is used strategically to have the audience question the way in which they receive and see through it. And that is a nuance that I don't think was recognized by reviewers upon the film's release, because it was mismarketed to a mainly male audience. But even beyond that, an audience that was not ready to understand the female gaze. Whereas now our culture is kind of ripe for understanding the female gaze. And it's proven even in the most commonly used words in reviews in 2010 and post 2019. So let's take a look at that now. You'll notice on the left-hand side are words more likely to be used in 2010 reviews. And these words mostly have a negative sentiment: crap, stupid, flick. And then we have Diablo. Obviously, they're referencing the writer Diablo Cody. We have good, bad, Juno. They must be referencing Juno, which is the film that Diablo Cody had won an Oscar for. And this was her follow-up film. So maybe people were coming from Juno and they were expecting something similar, and it was not the same. And then the most used word would be Megan, people referring to Megan Fox. So again, reviewers who were coming to the film lured or interested in it by the main actress because of her sex appeal or for other reasons, but that name showing up the most in reviews during 2020 is pretty telling of what people were looking for or wanted to comment on after watching the film. On the right-hand side, we have words more likely to be used in post-2019. So that's post seeing that surge in almost like 4.5-star ratings. Now we have words like iconic. People are recognizing the ways in which this film has grown in its meaning and cultural significance over time. It is becoming iconic. Not only is iconic, it's classic. We like the words female and feminist again. So now these themes are being recognized. What I find even more fascinating is the fact that words like feels, queer, themes, and cinematography also appear in words more likely to be used in post-2019 reviews. What that says to me as someone thinking about the male gaze and the female gaze is that people are now thinking more about how the film makes them feel through mechanisms like cinematography or thematic elements, as opposed to whether it's good or bad. Words that appear in the more likely to be used in 2010 reviews category. This reminds me of a quote by Emerald Fennell, who I love so much. I think I was watching some sort of masterclass or like video of hers on YouTube, and she said that people are so concerned with whether a film is good or bad, but we should be asking ourselves, how does it make us feel? And this is a very female feminine gaze question, right? How does it make us feel? Not necessarily is it a good or bad thing. And the words good or bad, again, are words used in earlier reviews, whereas now people are using words like feels or themes. I think cinematography is also really interesting for it to show up in the most commonly used words for reviews, because now people are paying attention to the way in which the camera is being used to evoke feeling or meaning for them for the film. So is this evidence that the female gaze has become the norm? At least for movie watchers going into cinemas expecting to see stories that provoke feeling more than action. I still think we have a long, long way to go, but this data is pretty compelling. And the case with Jennifer's Body is very, very niche and fascinating. And I've been trying to think of films that have had a similar journey from being misunderstood to cult classic status. And if you can think of any and you've made it this far in the video, please comment below, because I've been racking my brain trying to think of films that have had a similar journey. I love this article that claims that if Jennifer's Body were to be released today, it would kill. And I mean, I do question, is that true? I think that it's almost as if the film needed to be misunderstood to be revered today. It's almost like that experience has proven the ways in which not only the female gaze, but feminist issues have been so undermined and misunderstood in society at large. It's almost like emblematic of the Me Too movement, right? Because Jennifer's experience in the film is pretty much that. So we're going to leave it at that for this video. If there's any other feminist films or trends that you are curious to understand through data, let me know below, because I would love to turn this into like a series. Thank you again for watching. I hope you stay tuned for the next video.